If you're anything like me, then you'll take as much help as you can in understanding romance better. I reached out to UK based relationship expert and author Sophie Personne to get her take on marriage, dating, infidelity, and a few other topics. Here's our conversation. I personally can't say that I enjoy dating. Um,
Okay, fair enough.
it's like I guess for to be a particular guy as I am, I don't know. It's like
I think it's,
I did some couples therapy when I was married years ago, and we did couples therapy, and we also did ex my ex-wife and I we did singles therapy or counseling also, and it seems to me that people seek that kind of counsel and help during crisis. Is that usually the circumstance in which people come to you?
it often is in a crisis because it's a bit like when things are going right, you're not going to seek help, are you? So I think, like for instance, if indeed you're experiencing couple issues, people normally only seek help when they got to the point where they think that is going to end and they don't want it to. Or with singles, they've tried just about everything. They've been on every single website or whatever, and they're still not getting any results. And that's when they start thinking, well, maybe I should do something.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
sometimes even, like, because I've got someone at the moment and she's getting plenty of dates, but they're not good quality dates. So it's never going past the first date, even though she has probably six a week, which is quite a fair amount, really.
6 a week?
Yeah.
Is she doing speed dating?
No, just online dating, whatever. 55, divorced or just about to be divorced. And yeah, about 6 a week she's getting.
That's a lot of volume for even a guy.
There you go. But they're not quality dates. People forget it's not about quantity, it's about quality.
So with somebody like her, would you say there's a flaw in how she's like kind of qualifying or screening these people?
Yeah, and there was also, which is what she approached me about to start off with, she needed to really deal with the marriage and the end of said marriage. And also, why was she not attracting the kind of right people? But yeah, she was not qualifying. And we identified that actually she had a little bit of an attention seeking, I'm not going to call it a problem, but she clearly needed to feel that people were contacting her, and maybe when she was a bit bored or she was not getting any messages, she would go back online just to find someone, if you know what I mean, to message her, because that made her feel valued. But she's realized since then, because she's no longer, I've given her a little bit of a online dating ban, and even despite the ban, she's managed to pick up some dates. So it isn't just about online dating, and I think that's another issue, which is that people think it's the be all and end all. But actually, the last time I looked, only 25% of people we meet actually meet through online dating.
Like I just feel like we're not smart enough to totally figure romance out. It just seems like such a very complicated blueprint. Like, is that a fair thing to say?
I think that if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, that first of all, you need to find someone that you're going to have chemistry with, because that's what, happens first, is the chemistry. Then that person you've got to actually like, right? Before you can fall in love with them. You then need to accept their flaws and they need to accept yours. Then, as the relationship progresses and all the rest of it, you then have to actually get on living together. Associating family and friends that might be from completely different backgrounds, accepting emotional baggage or physical baggage sometimes, especially as you get older. And then, when you just think of all of these things that you've got to find in one person, it's an awful lot to ask for, really. And I think sometimes, and I think probably because we live in a society where everything's disposable, I think people don't always necessarily work at it enough, you know. But at the same time, there's flogging a dead horse and trying to carry on flogging the dead horse, and there's no point. But in the next breath, you know, one of the things I see on single people is they will reject someone from the way they look, or, you know, which I get, because obviously, you know, one of the criteria is that a man should have all his teeth, and then he turns up and he ain't got any. You know, that's fair enough. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes there's more than meet the eye, and someone can grow attractive to you as you get to know them, as opposed to that instant spark. But I think we also, in the next breath of being like in a disposable society, we also believe that the Disney movie exists, and yet I don't know anybody that has found Prince or Princess Charming from across the road with the sky opening up and fireworks and the grand disappearing and violins in the background, you know. But yet people, even in their 60s, still believe that is what will happen to them.
Yeah, I think that seems like the negative influence of media, like TV and movies and stuff. But can't we have chemistry, or I've had a high level of chemistry with the wrong people? Mm-hmm. Is that something to be aware of?
Yes, because if you think about it, whilst we have supposedly evolved, we're still animals. In the same way that you will like someone or not in a work environment, as a friend or whatever, it's the same in terms, it's chemistry. All of it is chemistry. So yeah, you might have a really high chemistry with somebody, but it's just completely wrong for you. But chemistry is something that it is lust, and it's needed at the beginning of a relationship, but it won't survive by itself.
Mm-hmm. So when people come to you, what in general do you feel like they're looking for? Whether it's they're looking for somebody to just agree with them, quite frankly, they want somebody to tell them a narrative or a lie that makes them feel good. What are people looking for when they come to you?
That's the answer to that is it depends, which is probably not hopeful, but it generally depends. So there are people who are coming because they want validation that it's not them, it's everybody else. They're not the kind of people I want to work with, because you have to take responsibility for your own life. And if you keep on attracting the right kind of partner, it's not their fault. You know, it's not the potential partner's fault that they keep on turning up in your life. It's you. There's something that you're giving out, a vibe or whatever, that makes it happen. So you have to take responsibility for that. People who look to blame the world, like there's no one online, which is a complete generalization anyway, I'm not really interested either, because they're never going to be satisfied, and they're setting such expectations as to these people should give them all of these things that they want, but what do they have to offer to the other person, if that makes sense? Because if you look at a lot of online profile, it's all about, I want this, I want this, I want this. But there's nothing saying, oh, and by the way, this is what I could give you.
That's one of my biggest complaints, you know, in my experience of dating. I'm more of the school of thought of what can we do for each other versus what are you going to give me and me only. That just, I think that just sets you up on kind of uneven footing.
And I think the truth of the matter is that anybody else will never give to you what it is you want. You need to give it to yourself first.
Excellent point. I like that. I may have to use that, Sophie.
There you go. But it is, you know, I mean, sometimes I recall one particular person, this was years ago. It was a woman, and she was looking obviously for a bloke, although not obviously, but you know what I mean. And on her profile, it was things like, I want someone who's got a big house, who's got a good job, a car, this or that. And all of these things actually could go within 2 minutes, because that person could have a car crash and change face, be disabled, lose the job, therefore lose the house and everything attached to it. And when I asked her what kind of she was bringing to the party. Was like, oh, I live with my mum. And I'm like, the expectations are completely, you know, if you want a nice car, if you want a nice house, well, try and give it to yourself first. You may not succeed, but you should try. And then ask all of these things of someone, because do you think you're that attractive to someone who's obviously worked very hard and stuff, where I'm not saying she hasn't, sometimes circumstances prevent us from getting, you know, that sort of stuff, but knowing her story, she'd not tried.
How are you evaluating these people?
First of all, with couples, a lot of the time, you know, I'd be approached by one or other. It's quite rare that I get both. There was one time where I got both, but it was because the issue was the stepdaughter. So I got both, you know, the mother and the stepdad coming in. But a lot of the time, and this is where I personally feel that counselling or traditional counselling does not work, a relationship therapist will speak to people together. So all they're doing, they're taking the argument from home to a different place where they're kind of seeking the outsider to agree with one or other. And you're not achieving anything by that. I always see people separately, because you then get a bigger picture. You then get both sides of a story. And also the often, 99.9% of the time, I've got past hang-ups that need dealing with and that don't need the other person to interfere with, if you know what I mean. So I get better results by seeing them separately than I do together. I wouldn't even see them together.
Okay. And are people allowing you to be honest and direct in terms of diagnosing or just evaluating what their situations are?
So there's different things. So sometimes I can see the problem, but because of the way the brain works, if I just hit them with it, I'd get, you know, the conscious mind going, no, that's not the case. So I need to lead them to the problem, which is a bit of a journey. Having said all of this, for certain things, I am extremely blunt. So someone who likes fluff would certainly not want to use me.
Okay. And does some of that, does some of those conversations overlap with, you know, sexual matters, like, you know, giving them some level of advice on what's happening sexually in their relationships?
So sometimes one of the issues I see the most is that one of them is lacking a sex drive. That's often, especially as you get on a bit in terms of age, it's often the woman, and it's often due to hormones and, you know, to do with the menopause, if I'm completely honest. But there's also a lot of the time a reason why sex might be a problem. And I think, you know, I can talk from my own experience, actually, and other people I've worked with. In some families, sex, especially, you know, I'm just over 40, but in some families back in the day, sex was seen as something that was dirty. For instance, my dad to this day won't let me see someone kissing on TV. So if it's like, you know, a scene in a movie or whatever, you change channel, because that's not something that you do. It's obviously a very Catholic upbringing, and obviously that's my own experience. But for a lot of people who are past 40, depending on how the parents have brought them up or how they demonstrated affection, or, you know, it will have an impact on their sex life, believe it or not.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with you with that. Or there's some instances where people go the total opposite direction sexually than
Yeah.
what their parents displayed. I'm not going to tell you about my stuff, but I can I can definitely see that. You know, I mean, honestly, in myself and some people I know and some people I've dated, like there's a clear correlation with how their parents' romance lives were, how affectionate their parents were impacting them.
It's interesting. The reason why I've related it to me is because I'm working with someone at the moment who basically had parents that were like that. I haven't got the issue with the sex thing, but she does. But then she's had over experiences in the last sort of 10 years that have made that happen, if that makes sense. So it was kind of various behaviours from previous relationship have reinforced the fact that, you know, she struggles with it. And sex therapy is not always just about, you know, teaching people how to do what. It's more about establishing what's holding them back and why, you know, they find it difficult to show their affection in that way. I think for women, a lot of the time is because they really need to feel the emotional connection before they can get physical. That's when they're starting to date, but also the relationship goes south. Where men kind of need that to reassure themselves that they wanted, needed, and loved.
Guys are we're such different creatures. I heard a comedian make the joke, a guy can find romance in having sex with a woman by a trash dumpster. Like we're just, I don't know. We look at that vastly different than women do, which I don't know, I guess adds to the complexity.
But ultimately, we all want the same thing, which is to be happy. We just go about it in different ways. That's all. Once you understand how people work, you know, it's easier to get it right because we do all want the same thing.
So are people wanting to understand how, you know, how unique and different we are? Or do you feel like people, they're trying to shoehorn the world into their own little world?
Yeah. And that's a problem. What they need to do is to, first of all, understand themselves. Once they understand themselves, they can start to understand others. But a lot of people don't understand the need to do that because it's not spoken about, if you know what I mean. It's not something that's taught in school. You don't teach people how to communicate properly. You don't teach people how to relate to others and how to get your point of view across without being offensive or whatever. If anything else, it's the other way around. We're taught that someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong, as opposed to understanding that your right isn't any more right than my right. We've come to our own conclusions over time through life experiences, and it's taken us a lot of time to develop our own opinions. So what right have I got to tell you that I'm more right than you are? We're not. We're just seeing it differently.
People sometimes need to be right. Like, you know, you have an emotional need to be the white hat or the hero or the good guy, and you have to immediately make the other person the black hat. And I don't guess I quite understand where that gets you in the long run.
No, but at the same time, it's the way we kind of brought up, isn't it? Like the parent is often right and the child doesn't know any better. The teacher at school is right and you don't know anything. And even through life, I suppose, when you go to work, I mean, I recall being, you know, in the corporate world, and sometimes I was told things like, you don't know the bigger picture. And my immediate reaction was, tell me the bigger picture, because if I understand it, then I can get it. But just the fact you know the bigger picture doesn't mean that this one or the other is right. And I think the issue is, I mean, it comes from the right place. Everything is from the right intention. The reason why we try and get the other person to see that they're wrong and we're right is because we want to show them the error of their ways, because we've been through whatever, which has given us that experience. So we should teach them why, you know, they need to think differently.
Here in North America, there's a big thing with pronouns. I think there's upwards of about 70 different pronouns people use who have different sexual or gender orientations, or however you want to phrase it. Is that impacting your work or impacting the people that you counsel at all?
No, not really. I think it all boils down to self-acceptance, whether it's because you're transgender, gay, straight, whatever. You have to accept yourself as you are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more about that as opposed to anything else, really. I guess, I mean, I interviewed somebody for my own podcast, and she was born a man. Used to cross-dress, you know, let's call it 10 years ago, married with 2 kids. The wife didn't really have an issue with it at the time, until obviously came out and said that actually I feel like I'm a woman and I want to go through the process. And the wife really, really struggled with that, because quite obviously this is not the man she married anymore. And it took a lot of work for them. And, you know, in said podcast, she explains the process and how, you know, they've made it work eventually. But it took a lot of time because it's acceptance, it's grieving, you know. This particular person was in documentary over here on TV, and the wife is looking at her having her hair done from, you know, wearing a wig, so that at night she was still kind of like the old person Pete that she could see, you know, see a little bit at night. But once she had all the hair implants and stuff, she burst into tears because she was like, all I'm seeing is a really confident woman, but I've just lost the last bit of what I had and what I married.
What would you say some of the bigger challenges are when these people, like, and trying to give these people the best counsel that you possibly can?
A lot of the time is the set of beliefs and expectations. So I had a particular person who kept on saying that that's not right, you know, that's not up to my standard. And it was in the workplace as well as in relationships. So it's working around showing them that their expectations and what she believes to be right may not be so. That's just the way she's been brought up, the way she's been taught, the way she's developed that set of beliefs. The secondary issue is people assuming, because they base everything on what they've experienced before. So they see a trigger and straight away they think they know the outcome. And the last one is really not knowing how to communicate properly and not knowing how to listen.
How should we frame our perspectives in the way we see ourselves and the way we see our world?
I think
in terms of having, you know, giving yourself the best chance for like a harmonious, healthy relationship.
Well, first of all, is facing up who you are, because the relationships that we have are a direct reflection of a relationship that we have with ourselves. So it's knowing ourselves and facing up to the stuff that we don't want to face up to, that we put at the back of our head. It's facing up to all of these things, because once we do, and we are basically honest with each other and with ourselves, because that's the issue. A lot of the time, the first person that we actually not honest with is us. So once we're honest with ourselves, then it becomes a lot easier to deal with anybody else.
I don't see that as something a lot of people are willing to do. It's a painful.
It's a painful process.
I'm sorry?
It's a painful process.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. Like I there's some things about myself that I've worked on over the years, and it's rather uncomfortable. It's, you know, facing the ugly truth. I mean, incrementally it pays off in the long run. The more comfortable and self-aware you are, the more better off you tend to be. But my observation in people is that they don't want to do that. They just want to have some, you know, things that somehow magically work.
And unfortunately, it is the only way. You know, there is no magic pill. There is no, it's everybody else's fault. But that's the easier option, to believe that it's everybody else's fault. I mean, one of the things that I really like is when, so I have a book and I run a Facebook ad, and a lot of the people, sometimes we write something like, oh my God, I've had to really look at myself, and actually wasn't his fault, for instance, that the relationship ended. I actually have to look at what I did and how I contributed to it failing. And I really like that, because it highlights that people, it's not always that they don't want to do it. Sometimes it's just that they're not aware. Because, you know, if for instance, you're having problems in your marriage or whatever, or if you're struggling to meet somebody when you're dating, what do? You speak to your mates, right? So you talk to your friends, and they're all gonna, you know, be on your side and say, oh, that's wrong, you know, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that. Or, you know, oh, I don't understand what you don't meet someone, you know, because there's nothing wrong with you, you're such a catch, blah, blah, blah. And that's all very lovely, but it's not hopeful in any way, because actually the person is seeking validation, as opposed to, okay, well, how can I look at this a different way? And how could I change the outcome by changing the way I'm dealing with it.
Is it fair to say that arrogance is a huge problem in dating?
Yes, there is, but I think there's also an element of ignorance, and not in the bad sense of the term, just that people are not aware of these things.
They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, exactly that.
Like when I think about arrogance, I see it in a few different respects. Like I think there's arrogance of owning a sexual organ. Like, and I say honestly to some of my guy friends, like, dude, having a male sex organ doesn't really give you a competitive advantage. And for a woman, like that doesn't give you an advantage, because plenty of women have perfectly functioning organs. And I think that also spills into, having material items. People lean against that. I mean, and it helps, but I think what it really boils down to is the kind of person you are, which leads into being, raising, giving as much value to yourself as you can, which you kind of talked about earlier. How often do you have to encourage people to raise gradual long-term value in who they are as a mate?
Let me just go back one on what you just said around, one of the things we forget, as I was saying earlier, is that we're all animals. And if we go back to cave times, the man was kind of tasked with going to hunt the buffalo, where the woman was kind of tasked with cleaning the cave and hunting, gathering and stuff like that. And in the same way that if you look at lions, the female will look for that, that it is the stronger lion, that it is someone that can look after them. And if you transpose it to now, we haven't changed that much. We still want, the woman looks for the security and what the man can provide in that way. It's an unconscious thing, but it's still there. And that's why the men, especially you see in 18, 20 years old, younger, when they go clubbing at the beginning and they're all like peacocks fluffing the feathers to impress the female. And that really goes back to that, as opposed to, just being necessarily arrogant. It's just the way we're wired. As we get older, and I think because there's more of an awareness nowadays than even 20 years ago, that's where we're starting to look at it differently. But at the end of the day, we're still animals. So I think to answer your question around the long-term value that you can bring to somebody, it's knowing that and accepting that, because that is how we are. Now, you don't then have to flaunt it.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up. So one of my challenges have been and I think I did an episode on this, is like being aware of who I am as a male creature, but also understanding that I have to manage those evolutionary tendencies and manage my DNA. How willing do you think people are in doing that? Or is that something you really have to push on them? Like, hey, you're a woman and these are your tendencies, or you're a guy and look, you have to be aware of this. Like, how much coaching do you have to give people in that respect?
I don't really use genders that often, to be completely honest with you. I do sometimes where, there's obvious traits, but a lot of the time someone will act a certain way because of something that's happened. So for me, it's more about, what has made them as they are and what has triggered certain behaviors and how we can sort them out so that it doesn't happen again. Because what I do, it's not about cancelling. It's not offering someone somewhere to talk for an hour a week. It's not that at all. I want people, by the time they leave me, to kind of never see me again. I mean, I do become friends with most of my clients because it's a very personal thing. And I literally have to hold their hand through some really tough times because they always, as you say, come at a point of crisis. But the idea is that they've solved these problems, that they don't need to talk about it for the next 10 years. It's been dealt with, and we can actually move on and move forward. Because sometimes people say, oh, just put a line in the sand and start again. Well, that's all well and good, but you have to deal with the past. You can't just put a line in the sand and hope for the best. Because in the same way that we're saying people put things at the back of their head, that box where they're putting everything in that they don't want to deal with, they sit on it and just put rope all around it. They don't want it to open, but it will open. It comes back in dreams. It comes back when you're driving. It comes back. It comes back. And the longer you leave it unattended and hidden, the harder it becomes and the more painful it is.
Should we accept that in general, relationships have a finite shelf life?
No.
No.
No, I don't think they do. I mean, yes, okay, you know, some people come for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, as they say. But I think that it's not that they have a finite, you know, or that they have a known ending. I think that they might have an ending in the way that they are at the time, if that makes sense. Like, if I give you an example, I went out with a guy for a couple of years and we split up, 5-6 years ago now. He's actually now one of my best friends. And it would never have worked as a relationship because we were friends. But you kind of have to recognize that and be mature enough to be like, right, we just need to stop this. And actually, we're getting on better as friends, which is what we did. We're now friends. So I think it's not so much that, you know, relationships have a beginning and a middle and an end. I think that sometimes it's also, for instance, you talk about divorce, people don't always work at it or they pick the wrong person. And I think that's especially true at the moment of younger people. Because of, you know, what people look like in Instagram and whatever. Before doing what I'm doing, I used to run events for single people. And I recall, so they were for the 40 plus, but somehow I ended up with 2 women who were about 25. And it was really obvious from the way they were talking and all the rest of it, that actually what they were looking for, sorry to be like a bit, again, generalizing, but they were looking at, I want nice wedding photos and I want a good gene pool for my kids. That's what they were looking at. That's not the premise for a long-lasting relationship. What people need to really look at is, you know, do they have the same belief? Do they have the same values? Do they look at life in the same way? You know, when they get to retirement age, are they actually going to have the same sort of vision then? I mean, I know we all evolve, but if you roughly have the same vision, you're more likely to make it work than if you don't, because relationships are difficult enough as they are. You need to give yourself a chance. And I think so many people sometimes just pick the wrong person because unconsciously they think, oh, you know, maybe a bit of a trophy to a degree. And that's not enough to make it work. A bit like what you were saying around chemistry and lusting, that doesn't last.
So the term I use for that is sometimes people are looking for ornaments. Like a guy is, or some guys, I won't generalize, some guys are looking for an attractive woman to represent them as their ability, you know, it could be their, to display their ability to attract and hold an attractive woman. And for women, I can see, you know, them wanting somebody of high genetic caliber to reproduce offspring, and you know, you lump in having protectors and all that other stuff. So I mean, to me, that seems like the obvious thing is to select your mate based on what you know.
But we go back to what we said earlier.
What's
the
that?
relationship that we have with other people is a
Mm-hmm.
direct reflection of the relationship we have with ourselves. So if someone needs an ornament, why is that? Why are they trying to hide in themselves? What is it they can't give to themselves that they need that?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. So, but
Yeah,
okay,
I'm just saying.
but for self-aware people
Mm-hmm.
who understand that intellectually, and they understand the right choice, if we want to quantitate, for, let's say there's a guy who is attracted to a 10, appearance wise, but he intellectually knows that the 7 is a better match for him, but he'll still choose the 10. Why are people doing that? Like, I mean, what's your take on that? I see those. I have to fight those choices on different levels. Why are people doing it? If they can, in their heart of hearts, know and feel that a particular person is better suited for them, but vanity is making them lose that battle.
There's a couple of angles here. One of them is that, first of all, sometimes we don't actually really know what's best for us, especially when, these sort of things are concerned. Because people will say, I have a type. But a type is often physically. I've rarely heard people saying they had a type relating to the character or the personality. And I think a lot of the time, and especially, this is where I'm going to go gender, but men need to lust first. So once they lust, once the woman's kind of fallen in love with them, then they can fall in love with her. And that's why you're probably going to be attracted to the 10 as opposed to the 7, where your head knows that 7's better. But the truth of the matter is that in this particular case, your number 7 and number 10, neither of them are right for you, because you wouldn't have the dilemma in your head if either were. If you met someone who was a 7, but everything else was right, you wouldn't even question it.
You don't know how screwy men are, obviously. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we make some horrible decisions. I've made mine. It is technology. Like, I want to go back to technology. Is I feel like technology sometimes gets in the way of people knowing each other intimately, and the muscle that we have, I guess the intellectual muscle of being able to interact and make a connection with people gets in the way. And I think it makes dating a little bit harder. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that a bit like what I was saying earlier about, people kind of rely on online dating, thinking it's the only way. Actually, it isn't. And we need to detach a little bit from technology. I think the way I compare it a lot of the time is, if you're looking for a job, you are going to put your CV online. You're not even going to think not to. You're going to do that. But you're also going to talk to people saying, oh, if you hear of anything, let me know, because I'm looking for blah, blah, blah. And we should really treat dating in the same way. And when you're putting your online dating profile on, what you're doing is, in essence, you're putting your CV for people to see. And if you look again at the correlation in terms of rejection, some recruiters don't even get back to you. And it's exactly like dating as such. So yes, technology has its place. Yes, it is a platform that, for instance, we would never have met without technology. Well, maybe we would, but I doubt it. So you've got to use it for what is good for you, but you mustn't cut out the actual human element. So in the sense of someone who's dating, they're often not open to opportunities. Yeah, in the same breath, they're too open. I'll explain what I mean. So let's say someone is dating, they've got this, profile on, let's say, 3 or 4 sites, and they do whatever. And then they go out on a Friday, Saturday night, and they just scan the bar, looking for potential. Yeah? They go to the gym, they scan the gym, looking for potential. They're verging on becoming desperate without realizing it. Where in the next breath, they'd be at checkout, buying a sandwich, and the person behind them starts chatting to them. They won't really see that as potential at all. And actually, it is about being open to these kind of encounters. It's about not scanning the room, but being open to being nice to everybody, smile and have a conversation, even if it leads nowhere. But we're losing the art of conversation. Don't get me wrong, I hate chit chat, but at the same time, I'm very good at talking to the old dear at the checkout, because actually, it probably makes their day, but it also allows me to practice how to do that. And a lot of the time we forget how to do that.
How big of a factor does fear play into people getting out of their own way? Like you make me, you remind me of something, just being out in the public at the grocery store or whatever. And I'll casually interact with anybody if I'm in a decent enough mood. But then sometimes in the past, I've walked away from women, and my take was, okay, that's a woman who's living some level of a fear-based life, or you know, and I think there's a lot of fear at play with guys also. But what's your take
So,
on the element of fear?
but why is there fear in that environment? And yet, if it'd been online, you would have sent that person a message. Yeah, the rejection would have been the same potentially.
Um, okay. I think
The issue with face to face and online is that if that person rejects you online, it's okay because you don't have to actually face up to it. It's just you on your own in your wherever you are at home.
mhm,
Where if you are in a public environment, people may notice that you've been rejected. So
bigger
then
audience.
it's the look of others and judgment.
So it's the fear of losing in front of an audience. Would you say that's what it is?
Potentially, yeah. But I think that again, if we go back to the fact that online dating is convenient, um, people enjoy online dating, even though they all say they hate it, because it is convenient, because you don't have to make an effort. You know, most people will scroll through profile, or as I call it, the online meat catalogue, while drinking wine in their pajamas. There's no effort whatsoever. Where if they had to go out, let's say speed dating, they've got to get dressed, they've got to do the hair, or if I like just fluff up and put a bit of like aftershave or whatever, they have to make an effort. And that's why online dating's so popular, because it doesn't require any effort, really.
Yeah, but I totally agree. But I think, and it's not, but I also think in tandem, it creates an environment for people to be cowards,
Mm-hmm.
just as some of these internet bullies, it creates a safe environment for people to talk tough. And when you see them in person, they're not so brave and they're not so bold. And I've had experiences where doing online dating, women are, they have a high level of confidence and a little bit of shit talking. And then you meet them in public, and then they sort of, they become Bambi, like this,
Mm.
this very bashful creature. And you just kind of wonder, it's like, okay, well, where's the person that was online?
Yeah. And I think it's going back to what we were saying earlier, where we are not accepting of who we are. A lot of people have two personas, the online version and the true version. And for me, I know that not everybody's aware, but I think this is why, for instance, your podcast is a good thing, because it's making it available for people who may not have even thought about this sort of stuff to become aware and to then research in their own time.
Is there a particular demographic more challenging for you? And I'm not trying to ruin your business, but like is there a particular, like, are millennials or Gen X, is there a particular demographic that's very challenging given what could be going on in the world for you to counsel?
I kind of mainly focus on people over 40. Um, Purely because I've got a bit more life experience, and therefore are probably more open to and receptive to what I say, where, a younger person often thinks that they know best, and it's just part of growing up. I don't know if you watch The Shift from Wayne Dyer, but basically really puts it quite well about, when we're 20 is kind of the morning of our lives. And we believe that status and all of these things are so important, which is why we go after nice jobs and we want to be at the top of our game and we have ambition and all the rest of it. And in the afternoon of our life, we realize that actually, yeah, this is all important, but people around us are probably a bit more important. And especially when they die, we wish that we'd made more memories rather than making more money. And how in the evening of our lives, so when we're older, we realise that what we believed in the morning was a lie. Now, I'm not there yet, so I can't tell you whether that part is true or not, but I can tell you that definitely for me, yes, I have realised that it's all well and good to be ambitious, and I still have ambition, but I have it in a different way than I did when I was 25.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe the younger ones I would find more challenging, and you have to be open. But in the next breath, again, you know, I've had people who are 40 plus and actually just want me to just say what they want to hear. I had one particular man who basically wanted to learn how to manipulate his wife. Well, I'll stop that straight away.
How do you deal with that? That's an
I
interesting.
just said to him that it was never going to work between us, so to speak, and therefore we were stopping
You're stopping with.
the coaching. Yes.
Okay. Do you ever have to tell people straight up, like, look, this relationship is not good for you, and it's in your best interest to, uh, end this relationship?
You can't just say it like that. I have to
Well,
kind
yeah,
of
that's
like,
why I'm not doing that. And that's why you're
yeah,
probably more suited to do
you
that.
kind of got to get them to their own conclusion. I recall one person who came to me with a view to move back in with her husband and make it work. And at the first session, because I was quite convinced that relationship was dead, and at the first session, I said to her, "Are you 100% sure that is what you want?" And she was like, "Yes, it is. Fine." So we did everything, and then we got to a point, I think it was about session 4, where they had a massive argument, and she contacted me out of hours, actually. And the upshot of it is that actually they're no longer together. I kind of knew from the beginning it was probably dead, but she didn't. And it wasn't my place to tell her. All I could do was put her through the motions and her to come to her own conclusions.
Hmm.
And also, she has no guilt over leaving because she has given it everything.
Okay. So one thing that never seems that will go away is infidelity. Is
Mhm.
infidelity the death touch of relationships?
There's so many different types, though. There's a lot of different types.
Okay, well
You've
let's
got,
go with the extreme version of sexual infidelity.
yeah, no, I didn't even mean it like that. I meant
Okay.
you've got the serial cheater, and that's man or women. More often than not man, but I think that with evolution in the last sort of 10, 20 years, it's probably both the same now. And it's just like they never look to leave the partner, they just want someone else. It makes them feel good about themselves. And it's the chase that's appealing. Once the chase is done, they're just not interested. Then you have what I call, I have no proof of this, by the way. There's no scientific evidence. It's just my own observations. You have what I call the young couples just had kids. And a lot of the time, normally this happens when they have about 2 kids. And the woman is overworked and is trying to feed the kids and do this, maintain having a life and a job and whatever else. And she thinks that she's bottom of the pile. But the husband thinks that he's bottom of the pile. And a lot of the time, the husband will cheat around that time, but it actually, in a funny kind of way, saves the relationship because it's just that he needs to feel validated. And these relationships won't last more than 2 years. And then he's kind of back into the family. The woman, most of the time, would never find out anyway. And, you know, they carry on as they were. It's just he needed that kind of, you know, someone putting him first, basically. Then you've got the cheating where there's a genuine problem in the relationship. And a lot of the time, it's not necessarily intended. It just kind of happens because they're not happy and then someone catches their eyes, and that's probably one of the most common types, I would say.
So should we put infidelity in the category of self-medicating?
Potentially, yeah, potentially. And sometimes it's not so much self-medicating, it's just they kind of need to know that there's still something in them because they feel they're not getting it from the partner and they're not necessarily knowing how to communicate that properly. the issue with infidelity is when feelings become stronger, because it can lead to all sorts of issues and actually, you know, be the death of a relationship. I've also known times where it has saved a relationship for one of them to have an affair and be found out, because it's opened up real communication where they've actually ironed out all their issues, and you know, both parties agreed as to where they played their own part into it and moved on, and 20 years later are stronger.
What is the best advice you can give people in terms of giving themselves an opportunity to have the highest level of happiness in a relationship, whether they just want to, you know, be married or what they call live together, be together but live apart? Like what's the best advice you can give people for romance?
I think it is to deal with the past. It is to deal with the emotional baggage and understand where that comes from. For instance, in my particular case, when I was younger, I always used to attract fairly needy people because, I don't know, I say I don't know, I do now. I just attracted needy people. And actually, it was because of a front I was putting on, because of the kind of job I was in. So people saw me as really strong. But inside there was a little soft side that every now and again wanted to come out and needed a hug. But the needy people didn't know that bit of me. And therefore, all of a sudden, I wasn't the same person anymore. And also, they certainly did not want to give me any support. They needed me to support them. And it was understanding why that was that allowed me to no longer attract this kind of people. And for me, it was due to a couple of things, which was rejection as a drip effect through life, and being a perfectionist. The anxiety of being seen as something that maybe I wasn't was creating that kind of behavior and that strong exterior that actually I wasn't. And that's why I say it's so important to be honest with yourself and accept yourself as you are, as opposed to pretending to be what other people want you to be. And I think a lot of people don't know who they are anymore, because there are so many different people to so many different people. They are one person to the parents, one person to, you know, the work colleagues, to their friends, to certain family members, to grandparents, to neighbours, to this, to that. And then when you have kids, you know, to their kids, and then to their partners, and they lose themselves through that because they feel they have to keep up this front to all of these different people. But who are they?
Self-awareness is the destination, but how can, like, what's the path to that self-awareness? Are you advocating? I mean, obviously a path is talking to people like you or yourself. There's journaling, there's some self-reflection, bouncing things off of, you know, friends who are honest and caring. But what is the path to that state of awareness?
The first step is acceptance. A lot of the time people say there's nothing wrong with me. And actually, we're not asking you to say there's something wrong with you, but accepting that there's certain things that happened in your past that may be influencing what you're doing now and what you'll be doing in the future. And if you accept those bits, you'll be moving in a different direction altogether, because you remove that anxiety of being all of these things. So self-awareness, as you say, is the destination, but it starts with acceptance, and then going in the journey of, as you say, maybe journaling, reading books, listening to podcasts, watching videos, and just growing as an individual, really.
Would you throw practice or you know, getting out there and, you know, dating and you know, going through some level of trial and error and then reflection? Would you throw that in there?
The trial and error sometimes is all well and good, but you're often going to have a lot of the bad trials, so therefore the errors, before you come to the conclusion. I think sometimes as well with dating, a lot of people rush into it after the end of a relationship, and that's not good for them. You have to have a bit of time to kind of like get back to who you are and grieve it properly. But people just rush into it because they want someone else. They want someone to be there for them. And again, there's loads of different scenarios in this, but it's actually very important to have properly put the lid on what happened before and be ready, because you're not doing anybody any favors, including yourself. And it's kind of not fair on who you're meeting. And it's also often the seed of future patterns of what you're attracting.
I see. Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I hope everybody else enjoyed as well. Before we stop, where or how do people get in contact with you with social media and your URLs, books, and everything? Do you have anything you want to plug?
Well, first thing, thank you for having me. My website is www.sophieperson.com. And to be honest, if you just type that in Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, you'll find me. My book is called Your Other Half, and it is available on Amazon. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure to include those URLs for people, as well as your book information. So, okay. Well, thanks again. And you have yourself a wonderful day.
Yes, you too.